In 1986, the Montreal Canadiens won their 23rd Stanley Cup. We all remember the heroics of the rookie goalie Patrick Roy, but there was another player who was a massive part of that unexpected cup run who often gets forgotten, Mats Naslund. Mats led the Habs in playoff scoring that year with 19 points in 20 games, and during the regular season, he put up 110 points, the last Hab to hit triple digits for almost 4 decades. And he did it in a physically punishing era at just 5'7" and 161 pounds. So how did this small Swedish kid beat the odds, become the first European-born player to skate for the bleu, blanc et rouge, and why is he largely forgotten? Find out in this, the story of Le Petit Viking, Mats Naslund, the most underrated Hab of his era. But first, hit that like button if you remember number 26 and subscribe for more classic hockey stories. So Mats always had the talent. By the time he was a teen, he was the most talented junior player in the country. At 17, he led Sweden to gold at the European Junior Championships and was named Swedish Junior Player of the Year. That's when NHL scouts started paying attention, but they, like everyone, had their doubts. Before the 1979 NHL draft, he made the senior team for the World Championships, a selection that was openly mocked in the Swedish press. They said he'd get crushed against men. He went on to lead the team in goals. That was good enough for the Habs to take him 37th overall in the second round. And that was rare because the Habs didn't bring over Europeans. At that point, in 73 years of franchise history, they had never had a single European-born player suit up for them. So what made them pull the trigger? Well, Montreal's legendary scout, Ron Caron, he filed a report on Naslund comparing him to two Habs legends, Henri Richard and Yvan Cournoyer. Both small, both fast, and both Hall of Famers. That was the pitch. Others in the organization had their doubts, but Ron was convinced Mats was worthy of being a Hab, a small diamond in Swedish packaging, and that diamond needed some polishing. For 3 more years, he stayed in Sweden. He tore up the Swedish Elite League, won a championship with Brynäs in 1980, and represented his country at the 1980 Olympics in Lake Placid, the Miracle on Ice tournament, where Sweden took bronze. He finished that tournament with 10 points in 7 games. But then he hit a roadblock that nearly derailed his career. In 1981, he tore his ACL playing badminton and missed the Canada Cup. The Canadiens, who had been talking about signing him, backed off. But 3 weeks before the 1982 World Championships all healed up, Naslund and the Canadiens finally agreed to a 3-year deal. And on May 31st, 1982, at 22 years old, he became the first European-born player to ever sign a contract with the Montreal Canadiens. When he arrived at training camp in the fall of 1982, the locker room didn't quite know what to make of him. Mario Tremblay, the longtime Habs winger, took one look at him and joked to reporters that the Canadiens had only received half a player and the other half would arrive later. That wouldn't be the last time Tremblay singled out a player, never forget. Anyway, in his very first preseason game on Forum Ice against the Philadelphia Flyers, Naslund scored a hat-trick. The skeptics in the room went quiet quickly. By the end of his rookie year, he finished 1982-83 with 26 goals and 71 points in 74 games, third on the team in scoring behind Lafleur and Ryan Walter. He made the NHL All-Rookie team, and the fans at the Forum had given him a nickname that would stick for the rest of his career, Le Petit Viking. The next 2 seasons, Naslund kept producing, 64 points in his sophomore year, 79 points the year after that, when he scored 42 goals. And he was doing it at a time that wasn't kind to Europeans and small players. The 1980s NHL was a war zone. The Battle of Quebec was at its peak. Don Cherry on Coach's Corner every Saturday night telling Canadian kids that European players were soft, that they wore visors because they were cowards, that they didn't belong in the NHL. Naslund became one of his favorite targets. But Naslund, as always, let his play do the talking. And in 1985-86, he had the season of his life. He scored 43 goals and added 67 assists for 110 points. That 67 assist total would stand as the NHL record for a left winger for 6 years until Kevin Stevens broke it. He was 8th in the league in scoring, and he was named to the NHL's second All-Star team. And he did it while only taking 16 minutes in penalties all season. And it was his skill and discipline that would etch his name in Habs history. When the '86 playoffs arrived, the Habs were nothing close to a Stanley Cup threat. They limped in with 87 points. Teams like the Flyers and Oilers had north of 110. They had a rookie goalie. They had no reason to believe they could win. Well, they swept their first-round series against the Bruins, and they caught some breaks along the way, with Philly and Washington getting upset, and of course Edmonton getting knocked out in the second round because of the famous Steve Smith own goal. Those were teams with a minimum of 107 points in the regular season, the clear favorites, whereas Montreal again had 87. Bob Gainey took over the room. The young guys, Roy, Claude Lemieux, Brian Skrudland, caught fire, and Mats Naslund was the offensive engine. He scored 8 goals and 19 points in 20 playoff games, leading the team in scoring. He was on the ice for key moments, and on May 24, 1986, the Canadiens beat the Calgary Flames 4-3 in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final to win their 23rd cup. Waugh gets a lot of the fanfare for that improbable run. He won the Conn Smythe and he deserves it. It was his coming out party. But Mats was clutch. In Game 3 of the finals, he scored 2 goals and added an assist in a 5-3 win. And in the cup clincher, he assisted on the opening goal and on Bobby Smith's cup winning goal. And he didn't slow down after that. In the 1986-87 season, he led all Habs in scoring again with 80 points. And in the following season, he put up 83 points and won the Lady Byng Trophy, beating out Wayne Gretzky. Now, Gretzky had 149 points that season and Naslund had 83. But the writers still gave it to Naslund because Gretzky had 24 penalty minutes and Naslund had, get this, 14. He was only the second Canadian ever to win the Lady Byng. The first was Toe Blake in 1946. That same season, at the 1988 NHL All-Star Game, Naslund put up 5 assists in a single game, an All-Star Game record at the time. Mario Lemieux scored 6 points in that game and set the All-Star scoring record. 3 of his goals came off Naslund passes. In the 1988-89 season, Naslund had 84 points and led the Habs back to the Stanley Cup Final, where they lost in 6 to Calgary in a rematch of 1986. He was clutch again, tying Game 3 with 41 seconds left with a slapper, which led to a double OT win. But then the wheels kind of fell off. He scored 21 goals and 41 points in 72 games the following season. By his standards, that was a disaster. And when it came down to it, he was tired. He had a young family. He wanted to go home. So when the Canadiens offered Naslund a 3-year contract extension in May 1990, instead, he signed with HC Lugano in the Swiss League for less money but more peace of mind. He was 30 years old. He had 612 points in 617 games as a Hab. He had a Stanley Cup, a Lady Byng, 3 All-Star Game appearances, and then he exited stage left. That was the moment Mats Naslund's Hockey Hall of Fame case kind of died. The cup and the hardware were there, but 600 points just isn't enough to get it done. And he had a chance to get in because he still had gas left in the tank. In Switzerland, he scored 31 goals and 70 points in 42 games. The next year, he went home to Sweden, joined Malmö, and won a Swedish championship in 1992. Then he won another one in 1994. He was racking up points and trophies in Europe while NHL fans assumed he had retired. And then in 1994, at age 34, he played in his second Olympics in Lillehammer. The gold medal game came down to a shootout against Canada. Peter Forsberg scored the famous one-handed goal that ended up on a Swedish postage stamp. When Sweden won, Mats Naslund became something almost no hockey player has ever been, a founding member of the Triple Gold Club. The Triple Gold Club is the most exclusive distinction in international hockey. To be in it, you have to win all 3 of the major championships of the sport. As of today, only about 30 players in history have ever done it. The list includes Sidney Crosby, Nicklas Lidstrom, Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic, Jaromir Jagr, Brendan Shanahan, Scott Niedermayer, Chris Pronger, and Patrice Bergeron. Naslund got in before any of them. He, Håkan Loob, and Thomas Jonsson were the first 3 players to ever achieve it. Now, he did take another stab at the NHL. After the 1994 lockout, the Boston Bruins signed him to a 1-year deal. He played 34 games, scored 22 points, and went out in the first round of the playoffs against New Jersey, then promptly retired at the age of 35. He went home. He became a part-time carpenter, which makes sense, putting those silky mitts to good use. And after being inducted into the IIHF Hall of Fame in 2005, he helped build the Swedish national team as assistant general manager that won Olympic gold in Turin in 2006. Despite all of this, you don't hear much about Mats Naslund. Naslund's dominance was split between the NHL and international play. Had he stayed for 5 more years and put up, say, 70 points a year, he'd be at around 950 NHL points, and the Hall of Fame conversation would be different. Instead, he finished with 634, which doesn't pass the smell test for Hall voters. And the Triple Gold Club distinction came too early. He was a founder of that club that didn't have a name yet, and by the time it got formalized, the world was paying attention to whoever just joined it, not who started it. Really, it was his 100-point season that brought his name back into the conversation this season. When Nick Suzuki broke through that plateau, fans had to go all the way back to 1986 to see who did it last. He was a key part of Habs history, a fan favorite, the leading scorer on the franchise's only cup of the 80s, and a pioneer, the first European-born Hab who took the abuse from the media and still delivered the goods, paving the way for guys like Saku Koivu, who would become legends in a different era. Years later, when asked about his career, Naslund didn't talk about the points or the awards or the Triple Gold Club. He talked about the parade in 1986, when 1 million people showed up on St. Catherine Street, and about how strangers in Montreal still recognize him after all this time. "I appreciate my 8 years in Montreal," he said in a recent interview. "I had a great time, and especially this parade on St. Catherine Street with 1 million people. I still get recognized when I get there, so for my self-confidence, it's nice to get back to Montreal every once in a while." His number may not hang from the rafters. Newer fans may not know him the way they know Dryden or Lafleur or Waugh, but for fans who watched in the 80s, the Petit Viking was the guy who proved that size didn't matter, that Europeans belonged, and that the smallest player on the ice could carry the most storied franchise in hockey to the promised land.